Hey everyone and welcome back. So that 2030 unlivable deadline, is it legit or is it more complicated? Well, it's definitely more complicated. While the idea of entire major Aussie cities becoming completely uninhabitable in just a few years isn't quite what the main body of scientific research is screaming from the rooftops, the warnings are loud and clear. Our cities are facing some huge, and I mean colossal, challenges from climate change. We're not talking about some distant, maybe in the future thing. We're talking about now, and the changes are accelerating. So, what are we really up against? Instead of just saying unlivable, let's break down the specific pressures that scientists are pointing to. And trust me, the evidence is there, and it's coming from the big guns, organizations like Australia's own CSIRO Commonwealth Scientific and Industrial Research Organisation and the Bureau of Meteorology BOEM, as well as global bodies like the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change IPCC. These aren't just opinions. This is based on decades of research and climate modeling. First up, let's talk extreme heat. Yeah, Aussie summers are famously hot, right? But what we're seeing and what scientists have been documenting is an increase in the frequency, intensity, and duration of heat waves. The CSIRO State of the Climate reports, for instance, highlight that Australia has warmed by over 1.4 degrees Celsius since 1910, leading to more extreme heat days. Think about cities like Perth, Adelaide, and even parts of Sydney and Melbourne. A 2024 study highlighted in Technology Networks mentioned that heatwave-related deaths in Australia have already risen due to climate change, and city dwellers, especially in areas with less green space, the urban heat islands, are particularly vulnerable. Imagine consecutive days over 40 degrees C, or even nudging 50 degrees C in some inland urban areas. That doesn't just make life uncomfortable, it's a serious health risk, especially for the vulnerable. It strains our power grids, everyone blasting the AC. Impacts outdoor work, and can even buckle infrastructure. Are these cities unlivable? Not entirely by 2030, perhaps, but the livability score definitely takes a massive hit during these increasingly common events. Then there's water security. This is a big one for the driest inhabited continent on Earth. The IPCC's 6th Assessment Report has specific sections on Australasia, noting that southern and eastern Australia are projected to experience reduced rainfall and increased evaporation. This directly impacts the water supplies for major cities. CSIRO research has also pointed to declining streamflow in catchments for cities like Melbourne and those in southwestern Australia. Places like Perth have already invested heavily in desalination because their traditional water sources are under so much stress. And it's not just about less rain, it's about when it rains. More intense downpours, but longer dry spells in between. That's a recipe for both floods and droughts, sometimes in cruel succession. Add a growing population to the mix, and you can see why water wars isn't just a sci-fi trope, it's a looming concern. Next, the one that haunts our summers, bushfires. The Black Summer of 2019-2020 is seared into our national memory. And the science? The BOEM and CSIRO clearly state that climate change is exacerbating fire weather conditions. Hotter, drier periods mean more fuel, and more days with extreme fire danger. Cities that are on the Sojnitan urban bushland interface. Think parts of Sydney, the Adelaide Hills, outskirts of Canberra, and even some areas near Perth and Brisbane are increasingly at risk. It's not just the fires themselves, but the smoke pollution that can blanket cities for weeks, causing widespread respiratory problems. Can you call a city truly livable when you can't safely breathe the air for a significant chunk of the year? That's a genuine question many are starting to ask. And for our coastal cities, which is, let's face it, most of our major population centers, their sea level rise and coastal inundation. Sound of gentle waves, then a more aggressive crashing wave. The CSIRO research on sea level rise points out that global mean sea level has risen by about 25 cm since 1880, with half of that since 1970, and the rate is accelerating. This means increased coastal erosion, more frequent and extensive flooding during high tides and storm surges. Think about low-lying areas in Sydney, Melbourne's Docklands, the Gold Coast, Brisbane's riverside suburbs, and parts of Hobart and Adelaide. It's not just about beaches disappearing, it's about critical infrastructure, roads, railways, ports, and even homes and businesses being threatened. Some projections show that by 2050 or 2100, without serious intervention, parts of these cities could be regularly inundated. 2030 might be too soon for widespread abandonment, but the planning for managed retreat or massive coastal defenses needs to be happening now. Okay, that was a heavy dose of reality. And it's easy to feel a bit hopeless, right? But here's the thing, just because the challenges are immense doesn't mean nothing is being done. This is where we talk about the antithesis. The response to these threats. Many of the official reports, like those from the Department of Climate Change, Energy, the Environment and Water (DCC), outline national strategies for climate resilience and adaptation. But what does that look like on the ground? Well, for heat, cities are exploring options like increasing urban greening, more trees, parks, green roofs to combat the urban heat island effect. Some are looking at cool pavement technologies. And there's a big push for better building design and public awareness campaigns. Think about Melbourne's urban forest strategy or Sydney's plans to increase canopy cover. These aren't just about making the city look nicer, they're vital for cooling. For water security, it's a multi-pronged approach. Perth has been a leader in desalination and large-scale water recycling. Other cities are focusing on water-sensitive urban design, rainwater harvesting, and, yes, those sometimes unpopular water restrictions during droughts. There's a huge investment in more efficient irrigation for agriculture, which uses a lot of our water, to free up resources for urban areas. The Australian Water Association often features innovations in smart water management. When it comes to bushfires, it's about improved forecasting, better land management practices including indigenous fire management techniques, stricter building codes in at-risk areas, and well-funded emergency services. But it's also about tough conversations about where we build and whether some areas are simply too risky. And for sea level rise, we're seeing a mix of strategies. Some areas are investing in seawalls and other coastal defenses. Others are looking at restoring natural coastal habitats like mangroves and salt marshes, which act as natural buffers. And in some highly vulnerable spots, difficult discussions about relocation or managed retreat are beginning, though this is often a last resort. The Climate Council, an independent body, has released reports identifying vulnerable electorates, sometimes pointing out that a percentage of properties could become uninsurable by 2030, which is a slightly different, but very impactful, way of looking at livability. For example, their Uninsurable Nation report from 2022 identified places like Nishalls in Victoria and Richmond in NSW as having high percentages of properties at risk. This isn't scientists saying the city is unlivable, but that for individual property owners, the financial viability of living there could plummet. But here's a critical point. Many argue that these adaptation measures, while essential, are often playing catch-up. They're treating the symptoms. The argument is that without aggressive global action on reducing emissions, the root cause of climate change, adaptation can only take us so far. It's like bailing water out of a boat with a hole in it. You need to plug the hole too. And some critics say current adaptation plans aren't ambitious enough, or that funding is insufficient, or that implementation is too slow given the urgency. They might point to the fact that while we have national strategies, the on-ground action can be fragmented across different states and local councils. So where does this leave us? This is the synthesis part. It's not a simple case of cities will be fine versus we're all doomed by 2030. The reality is far more nuanced and, frankly, more challenging. Australian cities are not likely to be entirely abandoned, ghost towns by 2030 in the way some sensationalist headlines might imply. However, the quality of life and the fundamental livability in many areas are undeniably under serious threat and are already being impacted. Some specific, highly exposed communities or coastal fringes might face extreme, existential choices much sooner than others. The crucial understanding here is that livability isn't a switch that just flips off. It's a spectrum, and climate change is pushing many of our urban environments towards the more challenging end of that spectrum. What we're likely to see by 2030, and certainly beyond, are cities that are more expensive to live in due to insurance costs, adaptation measures, higher prices for scarce resources like water, cities with greater inequalities as vulnerable populations often live in the most at-risk areas with the fewest resources to adapt, and cities where our lifestyle is increasingly dictated by environmental extremes. Think more indoor days due to heat or smoke, restrictions on water use, and constant anxiety about the next flood or fire. What's becoming clear is that we need a massive, coordinated effort, from individuals making sustainable choices, to communities building local resilience, to governments implementing bold, science-led policies for both adaptation and rapid decarbonization. The science from CSIRO, BOEM, and the IPCC all converges on this point. The window to avoid the worst impacts is closing, but decisive action can still make a huge difference to the future livability of our cities. So, this brings us to the really big questions, the ones I want you to chew on and discuss in the comments below. 1. When does a city or part of a city actually become unlivable? Is it when insurance becomes unaffordable for most? When essential services like water and power are no longer reliable? When health impacts become chronic for a large part of the population, what's your personal tipping point? 2. Who should bear the primary responsibility and cost for adapting our cities? Is it individual homeowners, local councils, state governments, the federal government, or the industries contributing most to emissions? How do we make this equitable? 3. Given these projections, if you were planning to buy property or raise a family in an Australian city, how would this information influence your decisions about where to live, or even if to live in certain highly vulnerable areas? 4. And perhaps the biggest one, are we, as a society, truly grasping the scale and urgency of these threats, or is there still a sense of it won't happen to me or technology will save us at the last minute? What will it take to galvanize the level of action that the science says is necessary? This isn't just about abstract scientific data, it's about our future, our kids' future, and the very nature of life in Australia. It's a tough conversation, but it's one we absolutely need to keep having. Alright, that's a lot to think about. Let me know your thoughts down below. I really want to hear what you think. If you found this valuable, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't already, and share it with anyone who needs to be part of this conversation. Stay safe, stay informed, and I'll see you in the next video.